Pray with me. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. You may be seated. So you get up in a dark room, and because you don't want to wake anyone or even wake yourself up, you put your hands out and you feel your way towards your goal. Usually it's the bathroom, using memory and your perception of where you are in the room. Now, the only reason you were able to do this is because you know that there is the reality of furniture and walls that could come up and greet you, your shin, or even your face. And I have done that. I have run into the wall. The reality was there all along. But you were moving along in the darkened room. And you have your good reasons for not turning on the light to reveal what the reality is. But all it takes is a sudden flash of lightning or the flip of a switch to reveal everything. So we are going to be talking about the reality of Jesus' identity and how that informs and shapes our life. This is from Matthew 17, found on page 822 in your Pew Bible. Now, even as we end up our last week of this season of Epiphany in our liturgical calendar, it's fitting that we will be talking about what is being revealed, what is manifested or proven beyond question or doubt. Jesus was transformed before the disciples' eyes. Now, as the disciples go up the mountain with Jesus, who do they think he is? Now, Peter has said that Jesus is the Christ, but it's clear he does not have the full picture. The other disciples have their own opinions, but Jesus' identity is still being worked out in their own minds. Quote, "There are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." Now, this verse is one verse before the passage we just read, and it sets us up for the revelation of Jesus on the mountain. 6 days later, 3 of the disciples get a glimpse of Jesus' pre-body divine glory, as well as a preview of his coming exaltation. See, this is the divine glory that he retained as the Son of God, but was hidden in the incarnation. It's now transfigured for the outside world. This is the reality of who Jesus is. This is the reality that might be hidden in the dark, but then in a moment the flash of light reveals what was previously hidden. Jesus was transformed before the disciples' eyes, and the lawgiver Moses appeared with him on the mountain. Now, you may have already noticed the similarities between Jesus and Moses, considering that we just read Exodus 24. Jesus is like Moses, but when we see them side by side, he clearly takes a back seat to Jesus. They both go up on a mountain. Some of the greatest biblical revelations occur on mountains. While Moses climbed Mount Sinai, Jesus likely scaled Mount Hermon. They had 3 companions along with them. God addresses them after 6 days and from a cloud. When people are in the presence of God, their faces shine. But of course, we don't only get an echo of Moses, we get Moses himself. Peter, James, and John were allowed to witness Moses and Elijah talking to Jesus. They have appeared not just for Jesus' sake, but for the sake of the disciples and for us too. Jesus was transformed before the disciples' eyes to display Jesus' hidden glory. So here's my purpose statement: display Jesus' hidden glory to his people. See, in a short while, Jesus will not be around in bodily form to ask questions, and especially the one is, who is the supreme ruler? Who has final authority and supreme power for the people of God? See, these are folks who had recognized the authority of the law of Moses in the Hebrew scriptures, even as their appearance announces this continuity between the Old Testament and this not yet formed New Testament. There is also some discontinuity. One commentator likens it this way: the Old Testament and the New Testament sing a duet, but the New Testament carries the melody. See, Moses, Elijah, and Jesus are in conversation, but Jesus is Lord of Moses and Elijah. We know this because of the voice spoken from heaven, just like the voice at Jesus' baptism. The Father clearly states Jesus has supreme authority, surpassing the law. If we fully take this on board, we recognize there is no room for universalism, as if Jesus is one among many. I will make a quick reference to Paul in Philippians 3:7. But whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. So let me state my main premise again as we move on to Elijah. Jesus was transformed before the disciples' eyes to display Jesus' hidden glory. Jesus' supreme authority surpasses even the prophets. Now, in the passage before this one, we know that Jesus had asked them, well, who do people say that I am? Well, their answer, John the Baptist. That's a bad answer. Jesus couldn't possibly be John. Anyway, I don't know where they got that idea. Yeah. They also said Elijah. How about Jeremiah or one of the other prophets? Now, see, the folks in Jesus' time clearly saw Jesus operating in a prophetic role. He was calling people back to God. He had a simple lifestyle. He had zeal for the house of God. Maybe even he was challenging the religious status quo, and that gave him some prophetic muscle. The prophetic role Jesus played was much in line with the kind of prophet that Elijah was. And Elijah had some pretty cool healing miracles, and he did not die a natural death. As the Jews waited for the Messiah, there was this expectation that Elijah would return and announce the coming of the Messiah. If you read your New Testament carefully, you will know that John the Baptist did perform that very important function for Jesus. But the point here on the mountain is Jesus is not Elijah. When Peter, James, and John went back and told their story, they would have to say categorically they saw Jesus and Elijah and Moses all at one time. So once again, we see the reason for this fantastic display of Jesus' authority and power. It's to tie to the past, in other words, continuity, but also a break or discontinuity. These are folks who had conversed with Jesus, but any thought like Peter's that Moses and Elijah were going to hang around gets dashed. Jesus is not another prophet. Rather, Jesus is the one to whom the greatest Old Testament figures defer. Jesus was transformed before the disciples' eyes to display Jesus' hidden glory, therefore releasing our fears and giving hope for our own glorious resurrection. So we've come now to that point where we ask, what significance does this have for me? I mean, it's cool and all for these three disciples, but we need to think about the difference it makes for us today. I have 2 points on that. As Christians, we can be assured that we are worshiping God when we say Jesus is God. I would guess, and maybe even hope, that you have actually looked critically at the issue of the deity of Jesus. It's an astounding claim, after all, and one that other people might reject. It's just too far-reaching, they say. The passage gives us this firmer ground to stand on. It's certainly not the only ground. The best ground for that, of course, is the resurrection. That holds the best spot. But this picture of Jesus sets us up for the resurrection of Jesus. The Lord has given us a preview of the glory that belongs to Jesus, saying so firmly, Jesus is worthy of our worship and very dependably Lord. The fact that the one representing the law and the one representing the prophets stood on the mountain to display for all the eyes to see that they are in continuity, but Jesus is Lord. See, it was Jesus' face who shone like the sun. It was Jesus' clothes that became white as light. Jesus did not bend the knee to Moses and Elijah, as might have happened if the disciples had been up there by themselves. See, Peter even himself got it wrong when he wanted to make 3 tabernacles as if they were co-equal. Unequivocally not. They are not co-equal. To answer the significance question, Jesus is God, not a mere prophet, nor a lawgiver, and he is worthy of our worship. Secondly, the transfiguration gives us an anchor of hope, releasing us into freedom. Now, it's my assessment that we have some in our congregation who live with fear and need to be released to live more freely in God's love and purpose. Now, whether that fear is on the surface, where we recognize it, or it's the deeper stuff that comes out in unexpected places and situations, and especially if you get angry, you can almost guarantee there's fear under that. But I say the way forward is to go up the mountain with Jesus and ask, what do we find here as we contemplate the transfiguration? And I would invite you to do just that in this time of Lent that is coming up starting on Wednesday. Contemplate, what would it mean for you to go up on the mountain and think deeply on the transfiguration? I feel like I've barely gotten started when I think about the richness of this event. So we get back to a hint of what I'm talking about in Philippians 3:11. And Paul mentions again, attaining the resurrection from the dead. If we go further along in Philippians 3, all the way to verse 21, we have this astounding verse. He will transform our lowly body to be like his glorious body. Think about it. He will transform our lowly body to be like his glorious body. So when we say yes to Jesus, the work of God begins, and this work happens on all many levels of our lives. We are aware of the moral ethics that start to come to play in our lives, that all of a sudden it's much harder. Jesus says, love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you. We look at the transformation that happens psychologically. We think how God reaches back into our events in our past and begins to heal them. We call this inner healing, where God is at work on the inside. But there's lots of work going on the inside. We gain a whole new perspective so that when we can say with Paul from Romans 8, I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. Now, you can imagine that if we have this bigger picture in mind, our own sufferings, whether they are bodily or financial or marital or societal, gets repackaged. This present suffering is nothing compared to the awaiting glory. Therefore, I'm going to hold on to hope and to that future. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him. We shall be like him. My second answer to the significance of the transfiguration gives us an anchor of hope that far outweighs our fears. So in summary, the transfigured body of Jesus, which at the moment is almost unimaginable to us in its glory and its power, is the model for our own. This new life which the Christian possesses secretly, invisible to the world, will burst forth into bodily reality and visibility. This is Epiphany. What is being revealed, what is being manifested or proven beyond doubt or question. It's now being brought into the light. Jesus, just as Jesus was glorious all along, but it had been hidden, this true glory is taking on the kind of flesh that we have. We too are being renewed day by day, but we may not have perceived it yet. It's amazing to imagine the profound impact this should have on our lives. So I say, what is invisible, let it come to light. I love the British saying, the truth will out. May the truth of Jesus' gift of new life be manifest in your life today.